Today, we're going to talk about something called the statistical mirage. It's this fascinating and honestly kind of terrifying idea that our basic instincts about data, they might be completely and dangerously wrong.
You've heard this a million times, right? No matter what you do, finance, science, marketing, the mantra is always the same. Get more data. The more information you have, the better your decisions, the more certain you become. It's pretty much the bedrock of the modern world.
Yeah, but what if that's not always true? What if, in some really critical situations, collecting more data doesn't make you safer? What if it actually makes you blind to the biggest risks out there? Okay, let's get into it.
So first, let's visit a world where our intuition is spot on. This is the predictable world, the one all of our standard statistical tools were actually designed for.
This is what people call the Gaussian world, like the classic bell curve. Think about something simple, like the height of every person on Earth. You're never going to suddenly find someone who's 50 feet tall, right? The extremes are, well, they're pretty tame. They don't really change the big picture. This is what we mean by a world with thin tails. And in this world, piling on more data is exactly the right move. As you get more and more samples, the average starts to mean something real. Your predictions get sharper, the randomness kind of settles down, and the picture gets clearer and clearer. Those few weird outliers, they don't break anything. And that's really the promise of big data in this predictable world. You just keep collecting information, and all that chaotic noise eventually smooths itself out into this beautiful, predictable signal. It feels like certainty is just around the corner. But what if we're not living in that nice, calm world? What if the reality we actually have to deal with is governed by wild, totally unpredictable extremes? And this, right here, is the absolute key. We're talking about two completely different universes. In what's called a fat-tailed world, the whole idea of an average becomes useless. Think about personal wealth. The average wealth in a room of 10 people gets totally rewritten if just one billionaire walks in. In this world, extremes aren't trivial. They are literally everything. And trying to predict them, it's basically a fool's errand. So let's say you're tracking something. Daily market returns, book sales, whatever. For 1,000 days straight, you see these small, totally manageable ups and downs. Everything looks stable. Everything looks predictable. You're feeling pretty good about your model. And then on day 1001, this happens. Wham! One single event, one monster observation, completely changes the entire story. The average you spent 1,000 days calculating, it's now totally meaningless. This one data point is all that matters. This is the crazy, mind-bending paradox of these fat-tailed systems. In the calm, Gaussian world, every new data point has less and less of an impact. But in this world, the longer you play the game, the more likely you are to see some monster event that just dwarfs everything that came before it. So more data can actually make that single extreme event even more important. Okay, so if we're living in a world with fat tails, what happens when we use tools that were built for thin tails? Well, we end up creating a really dangerous illusion of certainty. Let's talk about something like a confidence interval. When a statistician says they're 95% confident, that means something real in a thin-tailed world. But in a fat-tailed world, it's worse than meaningless. It's a dangerous illusion. Why? Because the model has a massive blind spot for that one monster event that's hiding just out of view. And this leads us to what's called the backtesting trap. An investment strategy can look absolutely brilliant when you test it on data from the last few years, but that's only because the one catastrophic event that completely wipes it out, that fat tail, just hasn't shown up in that particular chunk of history. The real danger is always waiting for you in the future you haven't seen yet.
So this really busts the whole myth of big data. Piling up terabytes of historical information doesn't give you a safety net against a fat-tailed risk. All it does is scale up the volume of what you've already seen. It creates this false sense of security, all while the true, unprecedented risk is just sitting there, waiting.
All right, so if we can't predict these crazy events, what are we supposed to do? The answer isn't about getting better at prediction. It's about adopting a completely different mindset.
And this is the fundamental shift. You have to stop trying to be right on average. The new goal is just to be robust. It's about making damn sure you can survive the single worst day you can possibly imagine. Because that one day, that's the only one that really matters in the long run. Basically, your focus has to change from expected value, what you think you'll gain on an average day, to ruin probability. You have to obsess over avoiding that tiny 1 in a million chance of an event that takes you completely out of the game. Because if that happens, all those little gains you made along the way count for absolutely nothing.
So this all leads us to a really simple but profound new way of looking at things. It turns out we've been asking the wrong question this whole time.
The old question, the one that makes sense in that predictable Gaussian world, is how much data do I need to be certain? We now know that in a fat-tailed world, that question is a total dead end.
The right question is all about resilience, not prediction. It's, can my business, my portfolio, my entire system survive a shock that is 10 times bigger than anything I've ever seen in my historical data? It's a question of survival, period.
Because once you accept that reality might be defined by these wild extremes, you realize you're not just playing a different game. You're in a completely different universe, and it has a completely different set of rules. Thanks for joining us for this one.